So with no further ado, we want to bring on our scholar, our teacher, our doctor, our sister, our elder, and our mama, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. All right.
Thank you very, very, very much. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, good evening, everyone. I am honored to have been invited to join you this evening to talk about ourselves as Black people and to talk about the issues that we are facing. I decided to entitle my remarks, "The Noose, the Swastika, and the Burning Cross." The noose, the swastika, and the burning cross. I have been talking about racism, white supremacy, for the last, I hate to say it, 37 years. And it has been interesting to me because many people, many of my colleagues in psychiatry have said racism was a part of the past. And Black people do not have to talk about racism anymore. And why is that, Dr. Frances Welsing continuing to beat on the drum about racism, white supremacy? So even though it is an evil and an injustice to see hanging nooses, I'm glad that they are appearing, because it is an opportunity for us to get oriented. You see, those of us who were hoping that the problem had disappeared. You see, but if a problem is not solved, it continues to resurface. Do you see? So we are not only seeing Jena, Louisiana, we are also seeing nooses being hung everywhere. And we are also seeing an individual who recently won the Nobel Prize, James Watson, you see, of great scientific fame, come out and openly state that Black people are genetically inferior in terms of intelligence compared to white people. And I'm happy about that. Do you see, now when he was confronted, he said he didn't know why those words came out of his mouth. I need to invite him to my office. Because it wasn't long ago, although it's been decades ago, that I debated another Nobel Prize laureate, Dr. William Shockley, the person who won the Nobel Prize for inventing the transistor. And he was going around in the 1970s talking about Black people were genetically inferior compared to white people. But I had written a paper that I presented in 1970 at the National Medical Association, because then some of my colleagues were talking about racism. And I had written a paper talking about why do people who classify themselves as white have to demean and degrade Black people's genetics. And that paper was entitled The Cress Theory of Color Confrontation and Racism, White Supremacy. And in that paper, I talked about the fact that when people who classify themselves as white keep saying something is wrong with black people's genetics, see, 3 of their fingers are pointing back at themselves. And I didn't invent any genetics. I just simply thought about the things that I had been taught in their institutions and in medical school. That the inability to produce skin pigmentation is defined not by Francis Welsing, but by their own scientists as a genetic recessive trait and a genetic deficiency. A genetic deficiency, and it is albinism. A-L-B-I-N-I-S-M, albinism, meaning the cells in everybody's skin that are called melanocytes, that are charged with the production of melanin pigment, the black pigment. If you have a lot of melanin, you're crystal black, a little bit less, you look brown, a little bit less, you look red, a little bit less, you look yellow, and white is almost none at all. Now, they had defined albinism as a genetic deficiency state when they were talking about mice and rats and other forms of life. They never thought that some black person would come along and say, if the majority of the people on the planet have pigmented skin, then as far as human beings are concerned, white skin is albinism. Do you follow what I'm saying? See, in other words, they were busy saying something is wrong with you, when in reality there was something wrong with them. And I explained that this is the reason that they suntan. You see, trying to create color. And I'm updating it and saying now that this is the reason that so many of them are trying to cover their bodies with tattoos. See, now we need to think about that, because sometimes monkey see, monkey do. And we don't understand why. See, it's like they do something, we think we have to do something. There's some black people who think that they have to get in the sun and tan too. See, but we have been blessed by the Creator with color. And indeed, and in fact, the Creator made us the chosen people, in that we are the mothers and fathers of everybody on this planet. You see, and as the original people, we were crystal black people. The color that we have been taught to hate under racism, white supremacy. You see, but this not only explained the suntanning and maybe now the tattooing, but I said this is the core of racism. And this is why racism contains within it, it's dynamic, the need to destroy black people in general, but black men in particular. You see, and we are seeing that with the high level of incarceration of black men, with the dropping out of school, and the high levels of unemployment. And that goes back to the fact that black men are perceived as the persons who can cause white genetic annihilation. Now, as a female, women, we have ovaries, and in our ovaries we have the genetic material. But women cannot impose and force sexual intercourse. Shall I say that again? See, females, we can try to entice and influence. But if a female, if I reached in my purse and pulled out an Uzi, and I started to threaten a man and say, I don't care if your wife is here, you are going to have sexual intercourse, and I frightened him, he wouldn't be able to. See, because the erection disappears in the presence of fear. So women cannot impose sexual intercourse. And so the white collective, from the time that Christopher Columbus came out of Spain in his little boats and started the white people circumnavigating the globe, they began to realize, wait a minute, all these other people on the planet are people of color. And the men, just like the fondling fathers. Did you hear the term? See, black people, we don't need to say founding fathers. We need to talk about the fondling fathers, the Thomas Jeffersons, the George Washingtons, and all of those slaveholders who were raping and taking sexual advantage of black women. They found out that by sexually relating, their white color would disappear. And they began to understand, wait a minute, when they realized that they were just a tiny, tiny minority population on the planet. And see, we're still busy calling ourselves minorities. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? They are the minority on the planet, but they know the value of saying repeatedly to other people that they are the minorities because it makes them feel weak and it makes them feel vulnerable. So we really need to start talking about the global white minority. The global white minority. The global white minority. See, and the global white minority realized that for them to genetically survive on planet Earth, they have to have control over all of the non-white people. And because black people have the greatest genetic potential to cause white genetic annihilation, the heaviest pressure has to be on us as a people, as a total people, and as black men in particular. And so therefore, we learned, many of us learned before we learned how to read or write. If you are black, get back. If you are brown, stick around. If you are yellow, you're mellow, and if you're white, you're all right. They were just color coding what they needed to do for white genetic survival. And that is continuing on the planet today. So I maintain that we need to update our understanding and understand the noose, like they're trying to tell us, is just a joke, and that it doesn't mean anything. I would suggest that for every person who hasn't already read the book Without Sanctuary, it's a pictorial essay of all the lynchings and castrations of black men and burning of black men as white people stood around and cheered, and in some cases taking home